Right, now back in November 1975, 6 people were killed in an awful mass murder. God knows it's got to be awful, in a small town on Long Island. The town is called Amityville. The murders took place in this house. 1 year later, George and Kathy Lutz bought the house, and they moved into it with their 3 children. After living there for 28 days, they were convinced the house was possessed by some kind of evil force, and they left their belongings and they fled, and they were really terrified. The events that supposedly took place there during those 28 days have been put down in a best-selling book. It's called The Amityville Horror, and there is now a movie out, or about to come out, of the book. George and Kathy Lutz are with us this morning to talk about what happened during those 28 days in Amityville. And James Brolin, super young man, actor.
Thank you.
Yes, much pleasure. Good to see you again, Jim. He plays George Lutz in the movie, and Jim is with us this morning, and it's great seeing you again.
Great seeing you again.
Lutzes, good morning to you both.
Good morning.
All right, first of all, the book and the movie depict all these kind of weird, strange things that happened in the house during those 28 days when you were there. What kind of things, George, happened physically? What were some of the things that happened that scared you?
Well, at first, just moving into the house was fine. It's a lovely house.
Yeah.
And we enjoyed moving in. Within a week, Kathy's hand had been touched by something that we discussed and couldn't explain. It was just something unseen.
I mean, this is in the daylight, or was it?
Yes,
It was during the day.
Right.
Okay.
We also had hordes of flies that would appear within 2 rooms, and no matter how many times we would kill them, they would reappear.
All right, now flies can be a real problem in this part of the country in the summer,
Sure.
in any house, you know.
But if you have 2 or 3 or 4 within 1 room, that could be commonplace.
And it
But
was
when
the
you're
winter.
talking over 100,
Well, this was the winter.
yes,
And you're talking about how many?
over 100 flies
Over 100
at
flies.
one time, and then you'd go around and kill them. They'd be lying on the floor. You'd come back an hour later, and they would be there, more of them.
Okay. There's something about green slime. What was that? On the wall in the movie, there's green slime comes out of the walls? Right? George, did that happen?
As the movie did it, not exactly, no.
Yeah.
It was more of a gelatin kind of substance that we thought the children had somehow mixed something up and spilled it around the house. The next time it happened, the kids were at school, and there was just no way to explain how it got there.
Did you all call, a contractor or a carpenter or anybody to come and look and try to...
We had several repairmen come in. Telephone repairman came 3 times because each time we would try and communicate with the priests, we would run into faulty connections. We had extreme fluctuations in the heat, between 40 and 50 degree fluctuations. 3 times the serviceman came in. One time he was there, he heard the furnace functioning, and yet there was no heat within the house. The temperature was at 40, and yet the thermostat read 80.
Okay, no, but you had somebody inspect the entire heating system. Goodness knows those of us who live in the North know what can happen with heating systems in a house, especially old houses. George, there was also something about black in the toilets, the water black, and making the ceramic, the bowls or whatever, black.
The china itself, it wasn't in the water. The china itself turned black, and at first it was one bathroom and then another and then another, so that by the time the investigators got there, a number of them was still black. It was still that way. There was never any reasonable explanation.
Did you have a plumber come in? I mean, when you first spotted
No,
it,
it wasn't a problem with the water. The water was clean. It was normal.
But did you invite any contractor, somebody like that, just to come say, hey, what's wrong with the toilets?
No, because
You didn't, yeah.
one of the things we found was the keyholes would ooze a black substance, which was of the same nature and appearance as that which was on the porcelain in the toilets. And when the investigative team came on March 6, 1976, the substance was still on the keyholes, and they were able to obtain samples of it because it was never in a moist condition.
Right.
And they wouldn't do physical damage to the door, in other words, carve out a piece of wood without our consent.
Had either of you had any experience before with the occult or the supernatural, ever before?
We didn't believe in it.
Were you afraid for your children? Why didn't you leave earlier than the 28 days if you were terrified?
Well, it was our house. First of all, we had never intended to give it up. Even after we moved out, we intended to find out what was wrong and move back in there. that's why the investigation was held, and people from different psychic research groups that at least we could check their credentials were called in and asked to come in. We've been asked many times why we stayed so long. It's very hard to remember the exact emotions or the moment why you would make a decision or why not.
But you finally did make it.
Well, by the time we left, we had lost a considerable amount of weight. Kathy was passing out quite regularly. I had lost over 26 pounds. And we were just reacting from one happening to another. We weren't really...
So you were generally shook up.
We weren't thinking, yes, as we normally would.
Jim, you played George in the movie, and you did research this and worked on it and so forth. You smiled. Do you believe them?
Do I? Yeah, when I'm sitting here with them, yes, I do. And I've watched George, and I've watched, you know, you've been an actor, David, and you kind of know how to watch for telltale signs when you're doing research and watching to people, and we also, well, you get an insight. And I can't say that looking over the story, I believe the book as it's presented totally. But sitting with these people, it's hard to deny a lot of the facts, too.
Were you
George
frightened?
gave up a lot of money.
Yeah. Were you
More than I
frightened
think that he would make on the book.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
One of the things...
Why would you keep up working on this if it was terrifying and not a pleasant experience? Why don't you just leave it behind you and forget it and move on to other things?
Things of this nature happen quite frequently. And when they happen to
you?
families... No, not to us.
Oh, yeah.
This was something we learned from the investigators and the psychics that came in. And when it happens to a family, usually they close the door and they don't talk about it.
Yeah.
And unless these things are talked about, they'll never be understood.
We went out, when the movie was being filmed, Jim, we went out to the house and talked to the couple who live in the house, or did a year ago. And they said they'd had no problems whatsoever. Everything was just fine. And they implied that this is all a big hoax.
Right. Well, one of the things we're very happy with is 4 weeks ago, both of us were subjects of a polygraph test.
Right.
It was given by Chris Gugas and Michael Rice. And we both passed with flying colors. We were tested separately on it.
Is the movie fun?
Well, the movie's very effective, I think. And I'll tell you, when I was sent this script, and, you know, we're all at the mercy of scripts in this business, I read it. I was working on another picture, and I didn't have much time, and I read it quickly, and they wanted an answer. And I just thought, this is going to make a terrific movie. And when I called, I said, let's get involved, and the agency said, why don't you pick up the book tomorrow? And I said, oh, yeah, there's a book. And then the next day I found out it was a true story. I wasn't aware of it. And so my involvement from the beginning was really sort of naive. And I just took it as something that was going to be a wonderful movie, and it is. I didn't realize what I was getting into.
George and Kathy Lutz, thanks for joining us today.
Thank you very much.
David Lutz, living in Southern California. Weather's better out there.
Yeah.
Jim, good seeing you again.
Good seeing you, David. Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you. We'll be back after these words from General Foods Kool-Aid.